Aloha. Hello to Anitha and Ankit, Brian and Camille. Kia ora to Cole and Fane and Grace and Greg and Iman. Hello to Jackie and Melina and Naomi and Natalie. Bonjour to Peter, Wajwinder, Scott, Sina, Sanam, Tekla, Tiffany and Titi. And hi to those of you joining us via recording. We have some extraordinary circumstances today covering the regions of OUM. So I want to welcome each and every one of you who have joined us in person, either from Australia, Aotearoa, New Zealand, Canada, the United States, Samoa, or American Samoa. For those of you who are in Australia and in the United States, you may know that there are some weather events going on right now. So I wanted to send a message of solidarity and safety to anyone who is joining us in the areas of Australia affected by the oncoming cyclone. So those of you who are in Queensland and northern New South Wales, as well as any of you who have families in those areas. If you happen to be joining us live in person today and are affected by that, rest assured that our sessions are recorded, and so you'll be able to get a recording of this session from your admissions counselor if you're not able to join us for the entire session. And for those of you who need to join us via recording due to those weather events, we welcome you here today as well. As well, I understand that there are some storms in central North America, as well as wildfire risks in central South United States. So I wanted to send safety and solidarity out to anyone who may be joining us from those areas. Whether you're joining live or whether you've joined us via recording today. So with that in mind, I'm Associate Professor Nicolette McGuire. I am OUM's Associate Dean for Student Engagement. So I'm so pleased to have each and every one of you here live or via recording to join us today for our Meet the Student Ambassadors session. So unfortunately, all of our student ambassadors are actually affected by weather events, either because they are present in those areas, living in those areas, or they have clinical rotations in those areas or family members there. And so they may be able to join us for certain parts of our session today. When they are able to join us, then we will ask them some questions, and I will prioritize any of the questions that you place in the Q&A box for our student ambassadors if and when they're able to join us. Never fear, we still have some information to share. Oh, here we go. We still have some information to share with you throughout this session. Hi, Philip. How are you doing today? Let me make sure that you can get your camera and microphone going.
I'm currently driving home at the moment, so my camera won't work. But if you can hear me, then that's a good start. So
no problem. It's very nice to see you, Philip, and I'm glad that you could join us. I was just letting our attendees know that due to weather events today in Australia and in the United States, we'll have our student ambassadors joining us in and out. So that's great that you're here and can join us for a bit. Would you like to introduce yourself to our attendees today?
Oh boy, don't even have time to get settled. Sure. I'm just kidding. So I'm Philip Newman. I'm one of the U.S. Student ambassadors. I have been for, I think, a year and a half, going on 2 years now. I am finishing up my preclinical curriculum. I'm about to start the USMLE prep course very soon to take step one. And then, I'm excited to get going from there. So that's about where we're at.
Thanks, Philip. I wanted to let everyone know that Philip is one of our student ambassadors, and these students help with highlighting some important aspects of our program and their own personal student experience. They're here to talk with you about your potential in our program and about the standards that they adhere to as students when they were prospective students and now as students of OUM. So Philip is here today. If you are in the United States and are interested to talk with Philip after our session, you can feel free to connect with him directly or through our admissions office. We also have student ambassadors that are present in Western Australia, and Victoria, and Queensland, in New South Wales, in the Australian Capital Territory, as well as in Samoa. And we have a new one from Canada who will be joining us at our next session. So you can feel free to reach out to our entire cohort of student ambassadors via their email address here or via individual emails. So Philip, I let our attendees know that I would prioritize their questions if they ask any in the Q&A box. And I see that Mesh has put in an answer, and I recognize Mesh from some of our earlier sessions. So shout out to you. Nice to see you again, Mesh. And they're sharing that they'd like to connect with you and that they live in Canada. So welcome, Mesh. I also am joining from Canada today, and unlike our colleagues in Australia and Samoa and Aotearoa, New Zealand, we're experiencing a snowstorm where I am at the moment. So I'm going to go back to you, Philip, and ask you a couple of questions about your experiences as a student at OUM, because you have a unique experience being yourself and also being a student from North America. So could you tell us about why you chose Oceana University of Medicine for your journey as a medical student?
Absolutely. I had been hoping and trying to get into medical school for several years. Being a physician was something that had been a dream of mine for a long time. And I tried to go the traditional route through the U.S. schools, and really, it's a very bureaucratic process to do that. And unfortunately, I didn't have everything lined up in a row. Really just kind of simple things had kept me out. So I had given up, at least I thought permanently, but I guess it was temporarily on, pursuing medical school. Wound up going the route of nurse practitioner and did an accelerated program. Never really felt like it was offering, quite the same level of detail and expertise that I wanted to get into. And one day my wife just asked me if I could do anything, what would I do? And I said, I wish I could go back to med school. And she said, why don't you? And I really realized I hadn't asked myself that, but I was providing for a family at that point. So when I looked around, I saw OUM and the opportunity to, continue working for the first, half to 2/3 of the program, all while attending classes. And I said, this is perfect. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm a lifelong student. I love school. I love the format. I love the chance to, interact with other folks throughout the world, because I was in kind of rural Ohio, which was very, kind of very cordoned off and kind of quarantined from, introspective thoughts. So I applied to OUM. It really wasn't even another choice. There's some other schools that pretend to offer similar things, but OUM really had a wonderful palette of professors and really in-depth instruction, and there was a lot of experience behind the leadership that I felt comfortable with. So I applied and have never been, never second thought it.
Your wife's a smart woman.
She's not listening. You don't have to say that.
Well, we're really glad that you did, Philip. And I think your story is similar. We do have a lot of students from the United States in particular that are nurse practitioners, and they just have that like hunger for additional knowledge. Like they are at the kind of highest levels of performance in the nurse practitioner field, but they still feel like they're missing something. Like there's pieces of the puzzle that they just can't put in. And so we hear this a lot from our students, and I know in your cohort and those that have followed you, there's a lot of students from the US who are previously nurse practitioners.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for me, it was always, I do cardiology. I love cardiology. I always wanted to be more in depth. I wanted to know, on the cellular level what was going on. I wanted to get into imaging. I wanted an opportunity to do procedures, and I was kind of at the limit of what I could do as soon as I graduated, and I didn't really. I felt like I could do more. I still had a lot more to offer. I didn't want to just kind of do paperwork for 30 years. Wanted to adventure out more. So.
We have a student submitted question for someone who is a nurse practitioner and submitted a question in our events page on our website. And they said, do I need to take any prerequisite coursework before medical school as a nurse practitioner? So did you take any, did you feel like you needed to take any prerequisite courses before you applied to medical school? Did that did that create any barrier for you? What would you tell this individual?
Yeah, none at all for me. I don't know what the what the standards are. I know that. Oops, I'm sorry. I know that that there were some prerequisites I think that were listed before, but I had kind of more than taken care of them, and I think it was having a bachelor's degree and maybe some background in sciences. I had been attempting to get into medical school, so I had actually done the biology, the chemistry, the organic chemistry, the physics, the biochem. I've done all of those ahead of time in preparation for trying to get in through the traditional routes. So there was no barrier on my end, but I feel like when I was looking through the prerequisites, and it's been 3 or 4 years now, but I feel like I felt like, oh yeah, that I'm more than qualified enough to submit. I don't have any more hoops to jump through, and I don't think I really heard from any of my cohorts that they had to go back and take any coursework if they were already working in healthcare. I think they were already pretty well established. On top of that, we had the basic science course. It was the first 12 weeks, which I don't know if the curriculum has changed much, but if there was any deficiencies in biology and chemistry, and even the dash of organic chemistry, we got all of that caught up fairly quickly before the true curriculum began.
I actually have a slide in this, so I wanted to share with our attendees today about what our admissions requirements are. We don't require any specific prerequisite courses before you apply to the program. We just require that you have a bachelor's degree. So some of our students have bachelor's degrees in scientific disciplines or in nursing, so they'll have some of the prerequisite courses that Philip was talking about, but that's not a requirement for admissions. We do require that you have a 3.0 GPA on schools that have a 4.0 scale, or a 5.5 on universities that have a 7.0 scale or the equivalent of that. That you have English language proficiency. And what that means is that your bachelor's degree needs to be from an English language university. And if it's not, then a test for equivalency of English as a foreign language can stand in for that. And then you must be a citizen or permanent resident in one of the countries that OUM serves. So that includes Australia, Aotearoa, New Zealand, Canada, Samoa, and the United States, including American Samoa. So Iman had a question and said, Philip, to you, thank you for taking our questions. I would like to connect with you and would like to know what topics are taught in the general principles course. So can you think a little bit back to your general principles is our initial course that all of our students take before beginning their systems-based sciences. And that course is in place so that students don't have to have those prerequisite science courses. So could you tell us a little bit about your experience in the introductory medicine course, Philip?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm driving through an area that may be a little dicey here for just a second, so if you lose me, I'll be right back on. But it was very, very, I mean, preparation for when you kind of hit the ground running with the coursework, but not, there was not a lot of balancing equations and, millimole this and all that with the general chemistry. It was more just giving you an understanding of how biology and how chemistry work, how they work together, and some kind of common themes that you'll be seeing, throughout the coursework. When they talk about, amino groups, what that actually looks like on a chemical table. So it's not it wasn't anything that was overtly challenging, and I should say that I have a lot of background in it. I've taken it twice before. So for me, if you keep asking, well, I don't think anybody, the hurdles if you haven't been exposed to before, it's going to take more.
You just cut out for a second, Philip, but I was hearing you talk a little bit how it's like, don't treat it like a hurdle. It's really about giving you some background information, pulling those topics back up in your brain that you may have taken with an earlier bachelor's degree and getting you more comfortable with the way that courses are structured at OUM. So in addition to what Philip said, Iman, in terms of the topics that are taught and the structure of the general principles course. So topics like cell biology and immunology and early introductory anatomy and physiology are the types of things that are taught. So you'll get a little bit of basic biology and basic chemistry in the general principles course as well. The general principles course is the unit that all of our students take before they start the medical sciences units, which are the courses that you might be more familiar with in a medical curriculum. So things like the cardiovascular system, urinary system, pulmonary system, endocrine system, and so on. And in our general principles course, there is a mix of asynchronous learning resources where there are short videos prepared by faculty that you get at the beginning of the week and can go through at your leisure. So they are a combination of recorded lecture material as well as interactive activities. And then during the week on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, there are live classes. Classes are held at 2 times per day. You just go to 1 class per day. And that is at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, North America, or the second class is at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So just 1 class a day for 2 hours. And in general principles, there is a workshop and then a case discussion and then a lecture chat, which is like a review session. So Philip, we've got you back now, which is excellent.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. And I realized too that, when I took the course, the curriculum has been restructured around. So the general principles wasn't the same thing, I think, when I took it, which has been, it's been 3 years ago now.
Yeah.
So I didn't have the same, I probably won't have the same experience, and I don't know if I can speak to it with kind of a level of expertise.
That's okay. You can still speak to your experience, which is important. So Grace let us know that she's currently in the USA and considering starting OUM in January 2026, and she's looking forward to connecting with you, Philip, and we're looking forward to getting to know you a bit better, Grace. Cole would like to know, hello, Philip, given your experience as a provider and your previous knowledge and education, how did you find the preclinical workload?
It really varies course to course. Some things you'll be very comfortable with, and you find that you really know a lot going into it, and there's the learning level is pretty accessible. And then you'll find some coursework, especially when you get into the the pathobiology and the looking under the microscope, where it's like I have no idea what I'm doing here. So it's like you're starting all over from scratch. It really kind of depends, but the nice thing about OUM that I really like, and that I can't preach enough about, is how every time there's a question, it gets answered in a very timely manner. And every time you struggle with something and you reach out to either your cohort, you reach out to your advisor, you reach out to your instructors, you get it answered pretty quickly. So even though you don't necessarily have the face-to-face exposure, that opportunity for getting your questions answered very quickly and making sure that the coursework is accessible and understandable is always well met.
I think because we, in our pre-clinicals anyways, because we have this hybrid program where our courses are online, That means that we have faculty that are in different areas of the world, which means that no matter what time of day you ask a question, you're usually guaranteed to get an answer back pretty quickly. And also because we do most of our interactions online, that our faculty are very responsive to their emails and want to make sure that you receive a response to your questions. Philip, do you have an advisor?
I do. I've had the same advisor, Dr. OKK, for going on 2 years now, and she was actually one of the first instructor I had in physiology. And she remembers me from back then because I had to reach out and tell her I may have to miss the final exam because my daughter was about to be born. And so every week, like clockwork, she asks for another picture of her, and we just catch up, and we become, colleagues and friends at this point, just because we've had such a close interaction over the years. So um, it's yeah. I've had two different advisors. One of them just kind of took a different type of position within the university. So but she's been mine for a while now.
She's great. She's really good. So for those of you who might not be familiar, we have it's called our Student Success Advisor program, and all students have the opportunity to be matched one-to-one with a faculty member, and you can be matched at any time. So you can start your match at the very beginning, or maybe you would like, a few classes in, you really would like to have some one-to-one support with a faculty member helping you with time management or study skills, or just supporting you and being your cheerleader as you go along. And that program is completely covered by your existing tuition and fees. There's no additional cost to having a one-to-one student success advisor. And the amount of time that you would like to meet with them is also up to you. We offer that at once a week, but if you'd like to do that less frequently, you're welcome to do that as well. So Philip, Melina wants to know, are you working while doing the MD program? And if so, I'm wondering how much time you spend working and studying. Has that been manageable?
Yeah, it's been manageable. I am working still, and I work I work a day position as a nurse practitioner. Working in study breaks when I can, lunch breaks, and sometimes when I'm in the hospital rounding and the day's light, I get some more in. Most of the time, once I get off 4 o'clock, then I'm pretty much hitting the books for the most part. Throughout the night. Now I have little kids at home, so spending time with them, and sometimes I lag behind. I know they recommend committing 40 hours a week to studying, and I can't say since I can't get punished for it, I won't say that I have been doing it, but sometimes I lag a little bit behind on it, but I've found it very manageable. When certain courses require more, then you really have to buckle down, and sometimes I've had to take a day or two off of work, take a vacation day, but by and large, it's been pretty workable and pretty doable. The nice thing about this coursework really is the accessibility of it. Being able to just kind of pull up your textbook on your phone, or pull up your lecture notes ahead of class, and kind of perusing things when you have 15 minutes at lunch is tremendous, and that's really one of the benefits of being able to do this asynchronously, or not asynchronously, but not in person, virtually.
Yeah, the classroom comes to you.
Yeah, it really does.
And Melina, and for others who are curious about this, OUM does have a lot of students who continue to work during the preclinical program. We actually recommend that students, when they're starting the program, that is when they're starting in general principles, that they try to book all of that time off so they can get a sense of the program and how much time they need for their studies, and then to add work back in as you continue through the program. And we found that works better for students rather than trying to work, a full-time job and try to figure out how you fit medical school into that. So that's something that we recommend for students who have lives with which they need to, continue to work through the program. Sorry, go ahead, Philip.
No, I was going to add too. For those of you, especially for us that are providers, I've really had to reshuffle around how I work. I was doing the, 8 to 4:30, a 40-hour a week job. And I've had to, kind of redefine where my priorities are, because when you start the med school journey, it really, you really have to kind of make that your priority. So for me, I had to, in order to make sure that I could continue to afford it and not have to pick up a second job, I wound up doing some travel nurse practitioner work as a locums. And then now I work a telehealth job where I, can sit at the computer and answer phone calls between using, and it's been very, very helpful that way. But prioritizing med school, not having med school secondarily to work. Once I reshifted that focus, then it became a lot easier to kind of balance it. But it may involve, looking for other opportunities to make sure that you can still earn and go to school at the same time. That's what I had to do.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really tough balance, especially for someone like you who's, you have another career, you also have a family, and now you're putting medical school into that mix. So I mean, it's probably not something that you like can plan completely for in advance. Like sometimes you have to just jump into it and figure it out as you go along. I don't know, has that been your experience, Philip?
Yeah, I definitely had to figure it out as I went along. I went in a little naive and thinking that I was, able to bench press a little bit more than I could, as far as, time management. Um, but I realized early on that, this can't take a back seat. You have to really, think about what kinds of things you'd be willing to sacrifice or adjust to make that. And if those sacrifices are something you'd be willing to make, then then it's definitely worth the process. But within 2 or 3 years, going to be you're not going to be working the same position anyway, because you're going to have clinicals. So, at that point, it becomes well, how much do I need to stay here working this position, um, versus finding an opportunity to make sure that I can thrive and still, I can thrive in school and still provide for the family or provide for whatever else you need to do. So, yeah, I definitely had to kind of figure it out as I went along. Took some side jobs here and there that, from a professional standpoint, I'm not all that proud of. Working in an erectile dysfunction clinic was kind of the low light of my professional career, but it did pay the bills at least long enough for me to figure out what I needed to do.
Sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
Got to do what you got to do.
And you're almost done, right? You're in your last SPMs right now.
Yeah, I have about 2 days left of SPMs. I have just finals to take, and then it's on to the USMLE. So,
And how are you feeling about that?
I just want these tests to get over. I just need my family to give me 5 minutes to study and open up the test, and then I'll be a happy camper.
Yeah. Because you're taking 2 classes right now, right?
I am. Yeah. Yep. I am. I'm taking GI and I'm taking trends and topics. So, and then that's it.
Yeah. Well, congrats.
Well, thank you.
We're almost there.
Almost there.
Anonymous would like to know, how many hours per week do you need to put in during the week? I'm assuming for study, assuming they need to study.
Yeah. I mean, the recommendations are 40 hours. And again, it really depends on your comfort with the subject matter. Some subjects I felt really comfortable with and I didn't have to. But a lot of them, for systems that I was averse to or that really had no experience with, 40 hours a week was really kind of the minimum. Making sure that you kind of pour over every chapter of the textbook and making sure that you can access it. And some, and it's reason, everyone's realistic. They know that we're all doing this in our own journey, and it's not, there's no police that will, that will come down on you for doing less than 40 hours a week, but it's how much you put in is how much you get out of it. So everyone's a little different. But with those really hard classes or those really difficult subject matters that you're not all that familiar with, 40 hours a week may be what's asked, and that may be the minimum amount you need to kind of stay on top. So it really kind of varies. But I don't think anything beyond 40, certainly not in the 50 to 60 hour week range. I've never had anything approaching that for any of the classwork I've had to take. So just kind of have to treat it like a full-time job.
Yes. A full-time job, and then, all the other things that need to be done during the day. We're about at the halfway mark, and I want to give you a break to just catch your breath for a minute. So I am going to turn the tables on our attendees and give them a little bit of a poll to make sure that we're here to support you today. So I have a couple of polls for all of you to answer today. So the first one I'm going to launch now is to tell us a little bit about where you're at in your medical student journey. So you should see a pop-up window that asks you where you're at, and that helps us to kind of know, oh, how, let's make sure we answer some questions that you have today. So we have some results coming in from our poll now. We have about 11 people now saying that they're starting OUM in July 2025. We're really looking forward to having you a part of the 2502 cohort. So congrats to those students. We have some students planning to apply to OUM this year. A few considering their options for medical school, and one with some initial curiosity. So wherever you're at in your medical student journey, whether you're starting in the next couple of months or you're just kind of where Philip was, a few years ago when his wife asked him if there was anything, what would he do? And he'd said, well, I would go to medical school. So maybe you're just in that initial curiosity stage, or maybe you're nearing the start of being able to start medical school. So wherever you're at in that journey, we want to be here to support you and make sure that you have the resources that you need. So thanks for answering that poll. I'm going to end this poll now, and I'll share some results with all of you so you can see the results for that poll. And then I'm going to ask you all one more question, and then we'll go back to our Q&A box where we have some of our attendees today putting in some questions for Philip and our other student ambassadors. So I also want to, again, invite anyone who's attending today, if you have a question for Philip or a question about OUM and the program, please feel free to communicate to us your question through our Q&A box. So one more poll, one more question. Okay, so tell us today what you'd like to know more about that we haven't yet had a chance to talk about, or if we have already talked about that, let us know. Oh, is it going to let me launch it? Oh, now it will. Okay, here I go. So let us know what you'd like to know more about today or in our upcoming webinars. So we have some results coming in. We have some students wanting to know about clinical years, about balancing life and work and medical school. Honestly, Philip, I don't know how you all do the things that you do in balancing work life and medical school. OUM has what we call kind of a non-traditional student body, where many of our students are not entering medical school directly out of a bachelor's degree. Some of them are, but many are entering OUM after having professions and other careers, whether that's in healthcare like Philip, teaching, engineering, other areas outside the healthcare field, and some students who have families or who are taking care of friends or parents. And so our students have different life trajectories, different needs than some more traditional students. So sometimes they need to know a little bit more about how do people with more life experience balance their time in medical school. All right, so we have some students wanting to know more about preclinical years and students' reports, clinical years, admissions, and something else. So if you're the one telling us something else, or if you have a specific question about any of those things you'd like to know more about, please feel free to use our Q&A box, and we'll try to answer some more questions about the clinical years and balancing life, work, medical school, some more about admissions, and our student support programs for the rest of this webinar. All right. Vili says, hi Vili, Talofa Philip. So you took the USMLE path, how was it? And what or who determines where your residency will be? So, Philip, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the USMLE path, and knowing that you're early on in that path, and I can fill in those additional details?
Well, first of all, when you say I'm early on, that it just absolutely breaks my heart.
No, I mean, you're just
Just
like
kidding.
about to enter your USMLE
Oh, I know.
position. You're not
Yeah,
early on.
I
I'm
know.
gonna back up that statement. You're very progressed along the USMLE pathway and just about to start your in-depth preparation for
There we
USMLE step one. Okay, is
go.
that better?
I was just kidding. It's okay. Yeah. So, I don't really have any basis for comparison outside of the other coursework, mostly because, to see what the other pathways have really been like. I would say that I have really shared what I've been doing with a lot of the physicians that I've worked with, and I've worked doing the travel nursing. I've worked now in what, 4 different states, a travel nurse practitioner in 4 different states, amongst hospitalists and cardiologists and nephrologists, and every one of them eventually kind of find out what I'm doing because they'll see me looking at PowerPoints, but they all we talk about the curriculum, and all of them, I have not had any of them yet say, oh, that's not real medical school. Every one of them are like, oh yeah, I remember doing that, or I remember learning about that, or oh wow, you're this far along, and this is what you're doing. And then they usually ask the litany of questions like, when did clinical start, and how are you doing this online? And because it's just a foreign concept to them, but the whole experience has felt very rewarding and very fulfilling, and I don't feel like the route that OUM has offered as far as the USMLE pathway is in any different than what you would get in the traditional medical school, outside of obviously the without the face to face or indirect lab time. um, but I have been kind of, sometimes I get a little bit neurotic about things, so I've been, always kind of banking USMLE questions and just kind of taking those, little quizlets every now and then that are step one preparation, basically since the first day I was accepted. And I always feel like, as I'm progressing through the coursework, I'm able to answer those questions, or at least understand the questions a lot, a lot better than I had been before. So I feel like it is, I don't have anything I can compare to directly, but I feel like what the education and the value that I'm getting out of this is no different than what I would get in the kind of the brick and mortar schools.
So, Rajwinder wants to know, how do you cope with overload?
Uh, that's a good question. I mean, you have to find whatever works for you as kind of a stress reliever. Really for me, I get I don't have much of an opportunity to unwind on my own anymore, not because of the coursework, but because I have a toddler at home. She takes up all my time, but at the same time, she's also my stress relief because I play with her for half an hour, and all of a sudden there's no problems in the world anymore. So everyone finds their own kind of unique niche. I would really encourage. It's very easy when you're sitting down studying for 40 hours a week to, start, eating poorly, and taking less time to focus on sleep and exercise and all the things that we know are supposed to make us healthy, but we're just gonna sacrifice it for this class, and then that kind of turns into bad habits. So whatever you can do to kind of keep keep yourself healthy and keep yourself as it's a stressful journey. There's no two ways about it. It's not so much that you're overwhelmed on the day-to-day level, but it's just a continuous heavy inundation with coursework and coursework and coursework and new concepts. And now we get finished with one system, and now we're on to the next system, and it's kind of a never, it feels like a never ending, I shouldn't say never ending, but it feels like a kind of a nonstop, always kind of on alert. So finding your own ways to unwind with that is really kind of up to the individual, but it's very doable. And that's one of the great things about having the student success advisors, Dr. OKK and I, because sometimes I'll just vent for 10 minutes about how I'm stressed out about something that's going on at home or work, and she just listens, and she's like, yeah, and and then we kind of move on for it. So having a, I don't want to say shoulder to cry on, but having an outlet for people of people, that can support you in this, and then having your own knowledge that, okay, we're getting ready to do this. What kinds of things do I need to prioritize to make sure that I'm physically and mentally well enough to continue this for the next 4.5 years is, those are good questions to ask. So how I've coped is, you know, it's day to day, it's month to month, and it's, kind of course to course. I've managed. We've all managed, and we see closer you get, the more the brighter that light at the end of the tunnel gets, and then I'm going to do this. I'm doing this. So it's almost done.
Yeah, you are doing this. I feel like the clouds are like just about to part for you. You have your last two final exams, and then it's like all the light's gonna come flooding in
I cannot wait.
for that. So I'm really excited for you. Chuckle has raised their hand, and I wonder if that means they'd like to ask their question live. So I think I can allow your microphone. If you'd like to ask your question live, please go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Uh,
Hello? Can you hear me?
yes, come a little closer to the microphone. We can hear some sound, but it's not quite clear yet.
So then I'm working. Yeah, I'm working. Um, I'm seeing anybody from Australia, any students are ambassador from Australia. Hello? Can you hear me?
I can hear you right now. When you were asking your question, I heard coming from Australia, and then I didn't hear the question. If you could repeat it, that would be great.
Okay, my question is there any students from Australia, any students ambassador from Australia?
Yes, there are. And I'm just going to bring some information back up for yourself and for anyone who's joined us a bit later in the webinar, which is everyone's welcome to come at any time. We're glad that you're here.
I'm so sorry. I
This is
was at work. I'm on break.
No, not at all. We actually have some different student ambassadors that are either in the preclinical or clinical area and are in different states. So you might want to connect with someone who is in your state, or you might want to connect with someone who's in the preclinical program. So that's up to you. You're welcome to, if you have a general question or anyone else who's attending, you can connect via all of the student ambassadors through the general email inbox, or you can connect with each one directly through their OUM email address.
Okay, thank you. And I noticed that I'm not able to type into my Q&A box. Is saying disabled. I don't know why. Because I wanted to put a question down, but I couldn't. That is why I raised my hand up.
Yeah, if you have a question about with the thing that I would recommend in connecting with the student ambassadors, like what was their experience like? What were the things that they needed to do as, a student in Queensland, or why did they decide as, a person who lives in New South Wales and had this particular background? Why did they decide to start at OUM? What were the kind of admissions that hurdles that they have to get over? But if you have a general question about like, what are the requirements for the documents that I need to turn in, then the best place is our admissions office. And I think sometimes people are a little bit wary about like phoning the admissions office or like emailing to the admissions office, because we're like, oh, that means that I've like stepped over a boundary and I can't go back. But what I will tell you is that our admissions counselors are the most lovely people that you will ever talk with. I actually see one of our admissions counselors has joined us as an attendee. So shout out to you. Hi, Camille, who's our admissions counselor for North America. If you are in Australia, Aotearoa, New Zealand, then you'll connect with Shanda, who you might have met at our admissions session in January. And if you haven't had a chance to speak with Shanda yet, and you have some questions about getting into the university, and you're in Australia, Aotearoa, New Zealand, then just reach out to Shanda through our admissions email here, or to Camille also through this admissions email. We also have a button on our website. There's a little form on the right-hand side of our website that just says like get more information. And so if you want to just write them a little note, and you don't want to send an email, you don't want to call the office, the phone number is also on our webpage, then you can also write them a note on our website. So I just encourage everyone to reach out to our admissions counselors, because they're really lovely and they're a wealth of information, and reaching out to them doesn't mean you've crossed over a boundary that you can never go back from. So I just encourage everyone, Chiku and anyone else, I encourage you to reach out to them. Okay, so I have a question from about our program. I want to make sure that I answered, because it was a little bit about what Philip was talking about. Tosin wanted to know, could we please explain the breakdown of the program curriculum? And I had some people saying, oh, well, what's like the USMLE pathway, and what's the standard pathway, and what are SBMs? So I thought this would be a good opportunity to answer Tosin's question, or anyone else who had this question about, well, what's the structure of the program curriculum? And I think another person also had a question about, oh yeah, Sina said, the preclinical curriculum is organized based on organ systems, cardiovascular, neuroscience, etc. Does that mean that each unit, say for example, cardiovascular, consists of biochemistry, anatomy, physiology, and etc. for that specific organ system? Thank you so much, Beth Sina. So Sina, and her other questioner, now I've lost that question again. Sina and Tosin, who were asking about our program curriculum. These questions are for you and for anyone else who wanted to know about this. So our program curriculum is broken into a preclinical phase, a transition from the preclinical phase into the clinical phase. So in the preclinical phase is what we've mostly been talking about, because Philip is right at the end of his preclinical phase. He's just about to take the final exam for his last preclinical class. So if you have access to the reaction button in the Zoom bar at the bottom of the screen, and you want to give Philip some encouragement for his final exam that he's going to be taking in the coming days, I encourage you to give a reaction for Philip and for other student ambassadors who are nearing the end of their preclinical phases. Okay, so our preclinical phase, what will happen once you get into the university is that we have a pre-OWeek set of activities. So you'll get a chance to talk to our CFO and bursar about all your financial questions and paying tuition. You'll get a chance to talk to myself and Dr. Okeke about our advising program and how to get started and organized for studying in the preclinical program. Then we have orientation week, where you get to meet all of the university's leadership, all the people that run student services at the university. You get to get some advice from our student ambassadors. You get to meet our peer supporters. You get some encouragement from the founder. You get to, and most importantly, you get to meet all of the other students in your cohort. At the last day of orientation, you'll get to meet our General Principles course director, and she'll let you know all the information you need to know to get started in General Principles. And then right after that, she releases the material for General Principles. So General Principles is the first course in the preclinical phase. And then, like Sina says, after you finish General Principles, you take a final exam, then you have 2 weeks off, and then you start your first organ system. So for students who are starting in July of this year, you'll take General Principles, and then your next course will be cardiovascular. And you always have 2 weeks in between each course, and each course is set up as an organ-based system. And like Sina said, within the cardiovascular system, you'll learn biochemistry, anatomy, physiology that's relevant to the cardiovascular system. In neuroscience, you learn anatomy and physiology and disease processes and etiology and pathophysiology and signs and symptoms, so on and so forth, about the nervous system. And then you progress through your 10 clinical classes in the preclinical phase. At the end of the preclinical phase, which Philip's just at the end of right now, you go into the transition phase. This is where the USMLE pathway and the standard pathways start to diverge. So USMLE pathway is for students in North America. That is students who will be doing any rotations in the United States or who are wanting to practice in the United States. Students who are not living in North America but want to take the USMLE steps, which are the licensure exams in the United States. Some students just want to increase their career options. So other students are able to take the preparation for the USMLE steps if they would like, but all the students in North America do fit into that pathway. So the USMLE pathway includes a USMLE prep course, which Philip is just about to enter into. So Philip, have you gotten any information about that course yet? Do you want to share anything about what you're looking forward to or not in your USMLE prep?
I haven't really received anything yet outside of just kind of the general attending of the North American meetings about what to proceed with. And I think I wasn't really expecting to hear anything just yet. But from what I've been told, it's a fairly intensive 6-month course, you know, and I think it varies from individual to individual. Really focused study on, you know, kind of reviewing and tying together concepts that have been you know, separated from course to course, but kind of looking at, you know, the total body picture and seeing where, you know, kind of different pathways kind of intertwine. And it's all preparatory, right? So it's all just, you know, very, very intensive. And if you've taken something like an MCAT before, or an LSAT, or, you know, GRE, you know that this, you know, the high level standardized tests really do require that, at least that amount of time for focused attention. So I've been told that it's, you know, continue expecting to be about, you know, 40 hours a week worth of work. And I'm assuming it's more than just kind of studying on your own. I think there's different, you know, different kind of metrics that you have to meet, or different, you know, check boxes that you need to check in order to get to the point where you and everyone else feel comfortable proceeding with step one.
It is an intensive course.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
think it's reflected by the fact that the USMLE itself is very intense. And
Yeah.
so the USMLE pathway, if you are interested to learn a little bit more about that, we do have a webinar coming up with Dr. Robinson, who leads the USMLE prep program. So that's coming up in a couple of months. For students who are
Can I jump?
Go ahead. Yeah.
I just wanted to add too that in talking with you know, some of the other physicians, like I mentioned before, that I've talked to, you know, a lot of those traditional brick and mortar schools don't necessarily have that focused, dedicated time, which I think is really neat, and it's very helpful that you don't have to focus on juggling 2 or 3 courses and studying for the USMLE all at the same time. That your program is laid out in a fashion to really put you at the best opportunity to succeed, to get those clinical placements, to get those rotations, to, you know, to get yourself set up for potential residency spots. So I think it's a really a very valuable thing. And even though I'm not necessarily looking forward to spending the next 6 months reviewing, I'm grateful that I get the opportunity to do that and really, you know, not have to worry about anything else.
And Philip, can I ask you, when you completed your USMLE and then passed your USMLE step 1, do you have in mind where you'll be doing your rotations yet, or do you want to just focus on one thing at a time?
Just one thing at a time. The hospital that I'm in now offers a lot of opportunity to fulfill some of those rotations. I have not really reached out to our education department here. Honestly, I'm kind of underwhelmed by my hospital, and I would really like to see what other things are available. Plus, you know, I've always been told that, you know, clinical opportunities are great for learning, but they're also kind of they can serve as a pre-interview in a way for potential residency spots. I really want to do internal medicine, so um, I would like to see elsewhere, other places where I might be able to go. So I'm kind of leaving it up to the whim of the schedulers to see where they can place me. I'm not looking forward to going away from the family again for X amount of time, but I think in the long run it might be the better way to do it. So I don't know. Ask me tomorrow, and I'll say I want to stay here and do it.
And
I'm
just
still
being
kind of on the
open.
fence.
Yeah, you're just open now, right? So we do,
Yeah,
OUM
very
does
much
have
so.
dedicated sites in the United States and in Australia and in Samoa, but OUM students also do have the option of having rotations approved at other sites. So we do have some students who have a preference for doing rotations closer to home. And that is something that our deans do work with sites to arrange for students that are outside of our currently approved sites. Now, we don't provide any guarantees that we'll approve a particular site. The process where our deans go through that approval requires quality assurance processes and lots of insurance and documentation and paperwork, but we do offer that to our students. I know we do in these webinars always get a lot of questions like, where can I do my clinical rotations? Can I rotate in this state? Can I rotate in that state? So my answer to that is always, we do have dedicated sites. We have dedicated staff that support students to go to those sites. And then for students who wish to do other sites, we do have processes in place that allow for approval of additional sites, but I don't guarantee that. I only guarantee that you can rotate at our currently approved sites. All right, so for students who are not planning to take the USMLE, the United States Medical Licensure Exam Steps 1 and 2, they are on the standard pathway. So instead of taking the USMLE exam, they take a preclinical exam at the end of their preclinical phase, and then they go into the transition phase. So the transition phase is a really exciting program actually, because it's more self-paced. Tosin also wanted to know, like, how long does the program last? So generally those on the USMLE pathway, because there's that 6-month period for preparation for the USMLE path, it's about 5 years, and for those on the standard pathway, about 4.5 years. The transition phase is where students can compress things a little bit because it's a self-paced online course followed by an in-person clinical skills building course. So all of our students, whether they're in Australia or Samoa or Aotearoa, New Zealand or Canada or the United States, do have an in-person component to their clinical transition in the transition phase. And then after that is the clinical phase. Philip, what rotation are you looking forward to the most in the clinical phase?
Honestly, the one where I go to Samoa, whichever one that is, I'm just really excited to venture. But as far as which subject, internal medicine is really what I've grown accustomed to, so I'm excited for the familiarity. The electives, I'm not a big fan of psych, and I've spent enough time in ERs that I'm not super excited about the ED, but I'm okay with it. But the electives, I would really like to. I'm really interested in imaging, so I'm hoping to procure some kind of radiology rotation, just so I can kind of learn a little bit more. But I would say of the ones that I'm definitely assigned to, the ones that the mandatory ones, the internal medicine is the one that I'm really interested in the most. That's the one I feel the most comfortable with, and that's the one where I feel like you really get to kind of sometimes get to play detective, which I think is kind of neat, trying to figure out where, what exactly is going on based on this presentation, this lab level, this exam. So yeah, I haven't also had a lot of time to really think about that either, because, again, the juggling act continues, but yeah, that's where we're at.
Sorry to push you forward, but I'm really
No,
looking forward to seeing
not,
you do well in your internal medicine. And as Philip highlighted, during the clinical phase, all of our students do have a clinical placement in Samoa, beautiful Samoa behind me here. A minimum of 4 weeks, but students can spend longer in Samoa if they wish. And it's a really fantastic opportunity to get a really good really in-depth hands-on clinical experience, even beyond what you will experience in clinical rotations in other countries. So we're about at the end of the time that we have for our webinar today, but I also see that Iman has raised their hands. So if you would like to, if you have your hand raised because you'd like to ask a question, please go ahead now and we'll end our webinar with your question, Iman.
Hi, thank you for having me, and thank you, Philip, for contributing your vast knowledge and your experience and sharing all of that with us. You did answer part of my question about the clinical rotations, but I wanted to know, like, in addition to whatever we're doing, how can we present or prepare ourselves better to be an attractive candidate for the clinical rotations in our areas? I know the deans, would carry the heavy load, but what else could we do to make ourselves a better applicant?
So thanks for that question, Iman. So the way that clinical rotations work is that you don't have to like apply to each of your clinical rotations. The one thing that does kind of open doors sometimes is if you, many of our students work in particular hospitals or have connections at particular hospitals. And so they know some of the supervisors there or know some of the staff there. And so they feel more comfortable working in that area. But don't feel the pressure that you have to, have those connections in place or kind of like impress potential supervisors. Where you really want to have your focus is, if you want to be impressive in the clinical rotations, is that you want to work really hard in your preclinical years so that you have all of the medical knowledge in place. Because what's going to happen in your clinical rotations is they're going to be firing questions at you all of the time. They're going to know that you don't know everything and that your hands-on skills are not yet where they're going to need to be. So you want to have that medical knowledge in your mind and then be really kind of eager and wanting to be there and learn. So where you are going to impress upon and do well in your clinical rotations is once you're there. You don't have to put the pressure on yourself to impress in order to get a clinical rotation. If you are in the university, if you've gone through your pre-clinicals, and if you have gone through the clinical transition unit, you don't have to then apply into each clinical rotation. All of your clinical rotations will be supported by our staff. We have dedicated staff. Their entire job is just to manage your clinical rotations. I don't know if I fully answered that whole question. Philip, you can't answer it because you're not in your clinical rotations yet, but I'll just ask Philip if you have anything you wanted to add to that.
No, I think I agree with what you were saying, that, there's really not much of an interview process and a selection process as far as trying to beat out other candidates for clinical spots. But I did ask the question during my interview for the university way back when, what will make me a good candidate for a residency spot, which is maybe a different question to ask, but a more, pressing one, which is going to be what type of residency do you envision? And some of you may not even know, you just want to be a doctor and you'll figure it out along the way, which is totally fine. For me, I wanted to do internal medicine. So I asked, what can I do to make myself a more attractive internal medicine residency candidate? And those are the questions where your student success advisor and your deans can answer. And the answer that I received was, the research course that we're all required to take is kind of the bare minimum, but the more time you put in and invest in research as a student, the more that may pay dividends off down the road. So just, keep that in your back pocket for later, whenever it becomes time. But I think that's kind of the more of the question on candidacy is where you're going to go after you graduate.
And we'll cover that in some more detail as well at our upcoming webinar on the USMLE pathway. Thank you so much, Philip, for joining us today, especially joining us in your car. I really appreciate that. And to all of our attendees who joined us in person or whether you joined us via recording, it was so nice to see you. We had a wonderful inpouring of questions into our Q&A, so we weren't able to answer all of them today. However, I am going to make a copy of all of our Q&A and pass it over to our admissions team to make sure if you did ask a question in our Q&A and you didn't get an answer today, that they'll get back to you directly with an answer. Before we go today, I just want to invite all of you to our next webinar, which is on the 3rd of April if you're in North America, or the 4th of April if you are in Australia, Samoa, or Aotearoa, New Zealand. And that webinar is going to be meeting our OUM graduates for North America. So I'll look forward to seeing all of you then, and hope you can join us live or via recording. Again, thank you so much for joining us in the OUM community today. Thanks again to our student ambassador, Philip, and we will see you all again soon. Bye for now.